After 2 years of promises, they gave my promotion to the worst person on the team. So I left and let them sink. When I started working at my company as a graphic designer, I hadn't imagined how much it would end up meaning to me. I'd just graduated, bright-eyed and ready to make something of myself, eager to dive into the creative work that I dreamed about. My job wasn't just any gig. It felt like an open door to a world of possibilities where my designs could make a real difference. Our team was small back then, just 3 of us, including a team lead I respected deeply. He was knowledgeable, supportive, and guided us with a sense of purpose that made every day feel like we were all pushing toward a shared goal. Those first days felt like a whirlwind, but in the best possible way. I loved the creative challenges that came with every project. There was an energy in the room, 3 people pushing forward. Each of us carrying our own weight but supporting each other through every high-stakes deadline and unexpected turn. I still remember those early mornings, huddled around a monitor with my coworkers, revising and tweaking every detail until we were certain it was just right. The camaraderie made the job feel less like work and more like a passion. With a team that small, it was easy to get involved in every part of the project pipeline. From brainstorming and concept development to final design and presentation. It was challenging, sure, but it was the best kind of challenge. I could already tell I was learning faster here than I would anywhere else. My skills were sharpening every day, and I could feel myself growing as a designer with each project we tackled. Then, as the months passed, I started noticing that I wasn't just another cog in the machine. I was getting faster, more efficient, and more adaptable with every project. Soon, I was the one training the new hires and walking them through our design software, our workflows, and even some of the tips and tricks I'd picked up along the way. Each time I got that quiet nod of recognition from my team lead, I felt that surge of pride, knowing that I'd earned it. And it wasn't just about the work. Over time, I took on responsibilities that weren't even in my job description. Presenting projects to stakeholders, organizing team workshops, creating templates, and streamlining processes all became part of my day-to-day. I was driven, pushing harder every day because I knew it was paying off. There was this unspoken understanding between me and my team lead, an acknowledgement that I was ready for more. And I could see it in his eyes that he knew it too. My hard work was paving the way to a future I'd dreamed about. And I was willing to put in every ounce of effort to make it happen. One day, I'd been called into my team lead's office for my annual review. I was expecting feedback, maybe a few critiques, and hopefully some praise. But what he said next left me buzzing with excitement. He told me I was on track for a senior designer role. If I kept up the hard work, he said, I could be looking at a promotion by the next review cycle. For a second, I felt like I was walking on air. The validation, the acknowledgement, all the late nights and early mornings, they were about to pay off. I could almost feel the promotion in my hands. A tangible reward for the dedication I'd poured into the team and every project I touched. That day, I left work with a new resolve. I was going to make sure I earned that role. And I'd do it with the same commitment that had gotten me this far. Not long after that promising review, things started to change in ways I hadn't expected. My team lead, the one who'd seen potential in me from the start, announced he was leaving the company. I remember the pit in my stomach when he told us. It felt like the ground shifted beneath me. He had been more than just a boss, he was a mentor. A guide who seemed to understand how to challenge us in ways that brought out our best work. When he left, his responsibilities were distributed among the remaining team members. And in many cases, that meant those responsibilities fell directly on me. We didn't get a replacement right away. And without his leadership, I found myself stepping up more and more, taking on tasks that were far beyond my original role as a designer. At first, it was exhausting but manageable. I took it as an opportunity to prove myself, thinking that if I kept the team on track, if I kept delivering, I'd eventually earn that senior role. And I did my best to keep things together. I became the go-to for almost every question. From minor issues with design software to major project bottlenecks. With every new hire, I found myself in a teaching role, training them on our workflows and managing a team that was rapidly expanding but desperately short on leadership. I gave presentations, took on challenging projects, and organized workshops to ensure our work met the high standards we'd set as a team. In the back of my mind, I kept replaying that conversation from my review. The one where I'd been promised a future as a senior designer if I proved I was ready. And now, with my team lead gone, I believed that stepping up was the best way to demonstrate that I was exactly what the team needed. I poured everything I had into those months, feeling like each project brought me closer to the goal I'd been working toward. But there was something else happening in the background, something that left me uneasy. Even as I tried to ignore it, a new hire had joined the team a few months after my team lead's departure. At first, she didn't seem like anything more than an average designer. But slowly, it became clear that she was anything but average. She was, to put it kindly, one of the laziest, most entitled people I'd ever worked with. She joined the team late, skipped basic responsibilities, and found a way to offload half her work on me. And while I was running myself ragged keeping the team together, she was spending her time sweet-talking higher-ups, charming her way into meetings, and even taking credit for work she hadn't done. The worst part was how she'd somehow managed to make it look like she was contributing when, in reality, she was pushing her responsibilities onto everyone else. At first, I didn't think much of it. I was too focused on my own work, too invested in the idea of proving myself, to pay her behavior much attention. But gradually, as more of her projects became my projects and as I started fielding complaints from stakeholders about her, I realized this wasn't a passing issue. She was becoming a problem. And I was the one left cleaning up after her mistakes. I tried to talk to our temporary team lead, who'd been given the responsibility of overseeing us until a permanent replacement could be found. I pointed out some of the issues I was having and how they were affecting not just my workload but the team's overall performance. But each time, he brushed it off, saying things like, "She's just finding her footing," or, "You're so capable, I know you can handle it." After a while, I gave up trying to get help. If no one else was going to do anything, I would manage the best I could. I didn't want to be the person who couldn't handle a challenge or, worse, who complained. I told myself that if I just kept going, kept taking on everything thrown at me, it would eventually pay off. But in the back of my mind, a small seed of resentment started to take root. I was tired, overworked, and honestly, a bit angry. This was supposed to be my chance to prove myself as a senior designer. Instead, I was doing two people's jobs while someone else cruised by, reaping the benefits of a system that rewarded charm over hard work. And yet, I kept going, believing that surely, someone would recognize my dedication. A year into handling the extra responsibilities, my hope was still holding strong, even though the weight of it all had started to feel heavy. I kept hearing promises of my promotion, assurances that my work hadn't gone unnoticed. So, when my second annual review with the new team lead approached, I felt ready. I had a carefully crafted presentation to showcase the projects I'd led, the work I'd done, and the feedback I'd received from clients and team members. I left no stone unturned, believing that surely, this would be the moment where all my effort paid off. The review went well, or so it seemed. The team lead nodded along, seemed impressed with the portfolio I'd assembled, and even complimented my efforts. I walked out of that meeting feeling certain that things would finally turn in my favor. For the first time in months, I let myself relax a bit, thinking that the end of my long haul was in sight. But then, just a few days later, the announcement came, and my heart sank. A company-wide email buzzed through my inbox, announcing that there was indeed a promotion, just not for me. The email congratulated the same coworker who'd been causing so many issues. The one whose mistakes I'd been fixing for months. She was now the official senior designer of our team. I sat there, staring at my computer screen, disbelief flooding through me. I'd taken on everything asked of me and more. I'd been assured, promised, and encouraged to believe that this position was mine to claim if I worked hard enough. And yet, it had been handed to someone who hadn't even been at the company as long as I had. Someone who seemed to care more about making connections than producing quality work. My stomach twisted, my pulse quickened, and a mix of anger and hurt boiled up inside me. I tried to process it rationally, to tell myself that maybe it was just a mistake or that there had been factors I wasn't aware of. But as I looked over the congratulatory email again, that familiar sense of resentment returned, stronger than ever. The worst part was seeing her reaction. She strutted around the office with a smug look, as if the promotion validated everything she'd done, the missed deadlines, the work she'd pushed onto me, the charm offensive she'd launched on our team led. She didn't just accept the title, she relished it, practically flaunting it to everyone around her. I saw her at meetings, talking down to junior designers as though she'd earned her position through skill rather than smooth talking and strategic laziness. And each time she made a comment about team standards or raising the bar, I felt a bitter taste in my mouth. It wasn't long before her promotion started causing more problems for the team. She took every opportunity to set her own rules, often clashing with other team members, stakeholders, and even clients. Her lack of actual design strategy became glaringly obvious to those who had to work with her directly. One by one, clients started requesting to work with me instead, subtly hinting that they didn't want to deal with her incompetence. But instead of addressing the issue, the team leads seemed to protect her, excusing her mistakes and allowing her to take credit for work she hadn't done. Finally, I decided I'd had enough. I set up a meeting with the team lead to address the situation. I came prepared with examples, evidence of my own contributions, and feedback from coworkers and clients alike. I laid everything out, explaining how much I'd been handling behind the scenes, all while she had been coasting along and now, as senior designer, causing problems for everyone else. I hoped he would finally understand and consider making things right. But instead, he leaned back, looked me over, and said, "I know you're capable, but maybe you need to work on your visibility a bit. You could learn a lot from her social presence. It's something that has set her apart." He went on to say that I should strive to emulate her approach if I wanted to be considered for a promotion in the future. I was floored. Here I was, presenting concrete results, and he was talking about social presence, as if that was a qualification. It was as if the substance of my work meant nothing in the face of her networking skills. I'd been going above and beyond, holding the team together, and still, it wasn't enough. I couldn't believe it, and to make matters worse, he gave me a mediocre review score, saying I should focus on being more present, like her. In that moment, the last bit of hope I'd held onto dissolved. It became painfully clear that my hard work and dedication were secondary to office politics and charm. No matter what I did, I'd always be measured against the low standards she'd set. I felt humiliated, betrayed, and overwhelmingly exhausted. After that final, gut-wrenching review, I knew things had to change. Something in me snapped, a calm sort of fury that almost felt liberating. I couldn't keep throwing myself into work, sacrificing my time and energy, if none of it was ever going to matter. I'd stayed because I'd cared about my projects, my colleagues, and the work we did as a team. But after years of giving my all, it felt as if none of those efforts counted. And if they didn't value my contributions, why should I keep going above and beyond? The next day, I returned to the office with a newfound sense of clarity. I logged in, took stock of my workload, and mentally drew a line. I would no longer be the dependable catch-all who stepped in to save a project every time someone else dropped the ball. Especially her. I'd do the bare minimum required. Nothing more. I'd finally start enforcing my own boundaries. If they didn't see me as senior material, then I wasn't going to continue taking on senior-level responsibilities. It was remarkable how quickly my absence was noticed. In just a few days, the team began to feel the cracks I'd left in the foundation I'd helped build. I'd been the go-to person, the one with answers, and now, all that institutional knowledge was gone. Soon, other team members started getting pulled into projects I normally handled solo. And the weight of my missing expertise became a palpable burden. The irony wasn't lost on me when my manager, suddenly desperate, started coming to my desk daily, asking for help on just a few things that had fallen through the cracks. He looked weary, as if finally realizing just how much I'd been handling behind the scenes. Every time he asked for assistance, I'd smile, politely remind him I wasn't senior staff, and suggest he ask our new senior designer instead. Her promotion, however, had done nothing to improve her work ethic. She'd sit there, basking in her title, as the rest of the team scrambled to pick up the slack. It didn't take long before some of the junior designers, who once had hope and enthusiasm, started looking drained and frustrated. I could see it in their eyes, the slow disillusionment as they, too, began to realize the disparity between effort and reward in this place. A couple of weeks into this, I decided it was time to start looking elsewhere. I polished my portfolio, reached out to industry contacts, and brushed up my resume. It wasn't long before a new opportunity opened up, a senior designer role at a reputable company with a supportive team culture and the kind of projects that had first inspired my love for design. They valued creativity, innovation, and respect among colleagues, the exact things I'd come to see erode in my current workplace. When the offer came through, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. It was validation after years of frustration, and I knew accepting it was the right choice. I gave my 2-week notice the next day, and the reaction was exactly as expected: shock, confusion, and a quiet sense of panic. My manager, clearly blindsided, asked if there was anything he could do to make me reconsider. But at this point, my mind was made up. I'd been shown where I stood, and I wasn't interested in waiting around for more broken promises. My last days at the company were eye-opening. There was a quiet desperation in the air as my team tried to gather any documentation I could leave behind, any guidelines I might share. Every day, someone from management or another team member would drop by, asking for just a few more minutes of my time to go over processes or share templates I'd created. But I wasn't obligated to leave anything behind. I'd built and maintained those systems because I cared, not because they'd ever acknowledged or rewarded my work. My final day arrived sooner than I'd anticipated, and surprisingly, it was marked more by relief than nostalgia. The office was unusually quiet that morning, as if everyone sensed a shift coming. My manager barely looked me in the eye when he handed over my exit paperwork, and I could tell he was rattled. He had a way of shuffling through sentences, searching for the right words, maybe hoping to coax me back just one last time. But I knew nothing he said could change my mind. As I cleared out my desk, a few coworkers drifted over to offer goodbyes, but none of the higher-ups showed their faces. The truth was, most people in my department had been sympathetic to my frustration with the promotion. Even if they hadn't voiced it openly, they were silent witnesses, nodding along as I explained my decision, even as they quietly acknowledged it had been a long time coming. I knew it was my departure that forced some of them to realize the cost of staying in a company that rewarded the loudest voices rather than the hardest workers. I saw it in the way my juniors reacted, their expressions a mix of encouragement and envy, subtly admiring that I'd found the courage to step away. Their quiet approval felt like a final gift, a reminder that my decision to leave was, in fact, the right one. It wasn't until my final hour that I saw her, the new senior designer. She barely made eye contact as she walked past, and though she tried to appear unbothered, her rushed footsteps told a different story. She'd been struggling with tasks she was supposed to manage, tasks she'd shoved onto juniors who, while eager, didn't have the expertise or experience to handle on their own. She'd bitten off more than she could chew, and I knew it was only a matter of time before her facade started to crack. Before I left, I took one last look at the place I'd once poured my energy, creativity, and heart into. I had invested so much into my projects, my team, and my career, and yet, it all felt like a distant memory now. There was no more frustration, no more anger, only clarity and a bittersweet acceptance of everything I'd learned. I wasn't the same person who had started here years ago, and leaving this place was just another step in realizing my worth. Walking out of that building for the last time, I felt lighter than I had in years. Leaving the office for the last time felt like stepping out of a fog. The air seemed clearer, my thoughts less tangled. In the days that followed, I found myself adjusting to life without the demands of that place looming over me. As if I'd been holding my breath without even knowing it, I spent the first week unwinding, catching up on books I hadn't touched, and connecting with friends who'd been there for me, listening to my struggles and frustrations. I didn't expect to find a new role so soon. A former colleague, Someone who'd left our company a year earlier for a higher position elsewhere reached out to me. We met for coffee, and she filled me in on the new culture at her workplace: collaborative, creative, and based on equal footing. There were no junior or senior designers. Instead, everyone was treated as a professional with a unique skill set and value. Her descriptions felt refreshing, like a second chance I hadn't expected. After a few weeks, I was hired into a new team that felt like everything my last one wasn't. Here, the emphasis wasn't on proving who was the loudest or the most boastful, it was on quality, collaboration, and genuine respect. My new manager encouraged individual creativity and shared praise openly with the team, something that had been all but absent in my previous job. We were treated as equals, no unnecessary hierarchies or favoritism. Everyone was valued for their work. And it was a revelation. With this fresh start came a confidence I hadn't felt in years. My first projects were met with encouragement and constructive feedback, not empty praises or manipulative comparisons. My ideas felt heard, and I could see the impact I was making, both in my designs and in the way the team operated. It didn't take long for me to realize that this was the kind of place where I could see myself growing. Reflecting back, I couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions about my old job. I'd once thought that loyalty and hard work would be enough to be recognized. And I'd poured myself into that job, hoping that respect would come with time. But leaving had taught me a different lesson. It wasn't just about proving myself but about finding a place where my efforts would be genuinely valued. It was never about giving up, it was about stepping away from something that had long stopped serving me. And as I embraced this new phase, I felt grateful for the journey. Every difficult project, every late night spent fixing others' mistakes, and every moment of self-doubt had led me here. I wasn't the same person who had started out in that marketing department. I had learned my value, the importance of respect, and how to recognize an environment that genuinely nurtures growth. In this new role, I'd found not just a job but a place where I could truly belong. Moving forward felt natural, as if I'd finally found a rhythm I could live with. And for the first time in years, I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. In those first months at my new job, I found myself reflecting on everything I'd endured at my old company. It was surprising to realize how profoundly that environment had impacted me, affecting not just my work but my sense of self-worth. Each day at my new company, I uncovered subtle ways I'd been diminished in my last role, ways I hadn't even noticed until I felt the difference. The change was liberating, but it also came with unexpected emotional weight as I processed the injustices I'd brushed aside for so long. One of the clearest revelations was that I had, without meaning to, absorbed much of the negativity around me. In my old job, I'd begun to question if maybe I was the problem, if perhaps I wasn't doing enough to earn the promotion, or if my personality didn't mesh with the company's values. Now, with the clarity of distance, I saw the ways I'd bent myself backward to fit into a culture that had no interest in reciprocating my effort or recognizing my value. This new team encouraged the kind of open collaboration I'd been craving. There were no hidden agendas. No one scrambling to undermine another for a promotion. Here, people asked for help openly, shared credit without hesitation, and took time to offer feedback rather than just moving on from project to project. At first, it was almost uncomfortable to let down my guard, to accept that I could work without constantly needing to prove myself. But as the weeks passed, I began to settle into the freedom of it. I remember one day, about 2 months into the new role, I walked into the office and felt a strange, unfamiliar sense of excitement. For the first time in years, I felt anticipation rather than dread. I felt free to contribute, to make mistakes, to learn without the fear of judgment hanging over my head. It wasn't that I'd suddenly transformed, it was the environment around me that had shifted. Here, my worth was tied to my work and the ideas I brought forward, not to the manipulations of office politics. My experiences at the previous company had taught me some harsh but valuable lessons. I had learned that loyalty, while noble, is not a one-way street. Just as I had been willing to give my best to my old team, I needed to find a place that would give back. It wasn't enough to work hard, I had to work in a place where hard work was appreciated, where respect was given and received in equal measure. That was a truth I had missed for far too long. The experience also reminded me to be vigilant about boundaries and to remember that there are times when no is not only necessary but empowering. At my old job, I'd let myself be used, thinking that it would eventually lead to recognition. In reality, it had simply enabled a system that was willing to take advantage of my efforts while giving nothing in return. That was a mistake I wouldn't make again. In my new position, I felt stronger, more grounded. I had learned not only the importance of speaking up but also the value of protecting my time and energy. No longer would I be the person constantly pushing to do it all. Without anyone else stepping up, I was here to collaborate, to contribute as part of a team that valued mutual respect. With this newfound strength, I realized something essential. While I might have felt broken down at my old job, that experience had ultimately empowered me to rebuild. Stronger than ever, I wasn't bitter about leaving. Instead, I felt a sense of quiet triumph. Walking away hadn't been the easy choice, but it had been the right one. And as I grew more comfortable in my new role, I knew I would carry these lessons forward. I had found my voice again. And this time, I wouldn't let anyone take it from me. As the months passed, I found out more about what happened at my old company after my departure. It was a strange thing, being on the outside looking in, knowing that my leaving had left its mark. The news came through occasional chats with old coworkers who had also decided to move on. And some updates trickled in through industry rumors. My previous team was reportedly struggling under the weight of responsibilities they hadn't prepared for. As expected, when the senior processes I had built over the years vanished along with me. From what I heard, the company tried to piece together my workflows, relying on notes, past documents, and sheer guesswork, but they had underestimated the depth of the system I had built. The way each process depended on minute details and specific relationships I'd nurtured over time. Without those structures, small tasks turned into tedious processes, and miscommunication between departments created project delays. The new senior designer apparently grew overwhelmed and started passing her workload to juniors, leading to resentment and turnover within the team. Initially, I'll admit, I took some satisfaction in hearing about their struggles. But after a while, that feeling faded, replaced by a mix of pity and relief. I'd escaped a place that had drained me, a place I had mistakenly allowed to define my self-worth. It was painful to hear that my former team members were struggling. But I knew they, too, could choose to leave if they felt undervalued. Meanwhile, my new job blossomed into an experience beyond anything I could have imagined. In my current role, I was thriving. My ideas were not only welcomed but often implemented. There was a feedback loop that allowed for actual growth, both personally and professionally. My supervisor, an incredible leader who valued creativity and open discussion, encouraged me to innovate, which inspired me to take my work further than I had thought possible. One day, I was tasked with leading a major project for a high-profile client, something I'd been hoping for since I started here. It was the kind of project I'd been denied again and again at my old job. With excuses like, "We need you on the foundational tasks," or, "The time will come." But now, my moment was here, and I was ready. Preparing for this project felt different. There was no constant pressure to prove myself, no fear of stepping on the wrong toes. I had confidence, knowing that my team would support me, and the thrill of genuine anticipation replaced the dread I'd once felt when taking on large projects. We worked together as a cohesive unit, refining ideas, troubleshooting potential issues, and celebrating small wins. For the first time in my career, I felt I belonged where I was. After months of hard work, the project launched, receiving outstanding feedback from the client. My boss arranged a team celebration, thanking me for my leadership and dedication. Hearing those words, I realized I'd spent years craving this exact moment, not for the praise but for the acknowledgement of the hard work, talent, and passion I'd poured into my job. Here, it finally mattered, and that made all the difference. Looking back, I'm grateful for my journey. The struggles, as exhausting and demoralizing as they were, shaped me. They taught me what I was capable of and helped me see the importance of valuing myself. I learned that while no job is perfect, there are places that will see you, appreciate you, and offer you the growth you deserve. With each day that passed, I grew more rooted in the present, more committed to the kind of work I loved, surrounded by people who lifted each other up rather than tearing each other down. And each time I thought of my old company, it was with a sense of closure. I'd left, they had struggled, and I had flourished. This was the path I was meant to take. And with a full heart, I finally closed the door on that chapter of my life. I had fought for the life and career I wanted. And now, I was finally living it. Months have passed since I walked away from my old job. And life has taken on a rhythm that feels like it's been there all along. The weight I once carried, the burden of always proving myself, of fighting for scraps of recognition, has lifted. Replaced by a sense of purpose and calm that I didn't know I needed. My new role has only deepened my sense of satisfaction. Each day feels like a step forward rather than an endless loop of efforts going unnoticed. I've learned a lot about myself in this new chapter. For one, I know now that my worth isn't tied to anyone's approval. I used to think that promotions and titles defined my value. That a job was only successful if it came with accolades. But in reality, true success came when I found work that resonated with me. When I surrounded myself with people who saw and respected what I brought to the table. Interestingly, I've also developed a new relationship with the concept of ambition. While I'm still driven, it feels different now, more authentic and less about external validation. Ambition, for me, has become about growth and learning. About challenging myself without compromising my well-being. I'm finally able to pursue my goals without the shadows of resentment and exhaustion. I occasionally hear updates from former colleagues who've also left the company. Many of them share similar stories of feeling undervalued or unappreciated, a theme that seems to have rippled through that environment long after I left. It's strange, yet somehow comforting, to know that I wasn't alone in my experience and that others, too, have found paths where they're valued and respected. In my personal life, I've become more open to change. Where I once clung to stability, worried that it was the only way to stay afloat, I now see that change is part of growth. I'm more willing to step into the unknown, to embrace risks, and to listen to that inner voice guiding me toward what truly aligns with my values. As I look ahead, I feel a deep gratitude, not just for where I am now but for the path that led me here. Without those years of frustration, without the struggle to find my voice, I might never have learned the strength of standing up for myself. I might never have found the courage to walk away. And now, as I take each new step, I do so with a heart that's at peace, knowing that I'm exactly where I'm meant to be. My journey isn't just about what I left behind, it's about everything I've gained along the way. It's about the strength I discovered, the respect I claimed, and the life I'm finally proud to call my own.